Hey, what's going on, guys? How is everybody doing? So one of the things that I always find funny about games like Genshin Impact, these hero collectors, games with like kind of a meta, is the cycle we go through where a hero may be severely underrated, someone who they don't think is very good. Bennett is a perfect example of this. When the game first came out, everyone was kind of hating on Bennett, not necessarily hating, but just, you know, he was definitely underrepresented on teams. And now it's like everybody's rushing to build their Bennett because people realized just how busted he really is. And I'm certainly coming around to that. I'm going to have a video all about that this week, how I was incredibly wrong about Bennett. But the point is that some characters are significantly underrepresented, and maybe it just comes down to a piece of gear being released, and that may just be what holds this character back. So we are going to be talking about Kaeya today. Now, I think Kaeya is one of these characters that people are going to start coming around to and start putting him higher in terms of their list and, you know, his overall viability. Because I do believe right now most people, if you had to rate all the heroes in Genshin Impact, would put him closer to the bottom in terms of viability and overall power and versatility. I think he's a little bit better than that, and I think that overall, with the potential artifact sets that are coming out, you know, we know that eventually a Cryo Set will come out. We'll have a set for every element. It could make his kit quite a bit better. So let's just get into the nitty-gritty and talk about why I think Kaeya is a sleeper unit. So first of all, of course, we have his skill, which is going to just shoot out some cryo in front of him, do a little bit of AoE, and it's on a really fast cooldown. 6 seconds is pretty fast in order to keep up. If you were to throw something like a sacrificial sword, which is what I have on him right now, it's going to increase his uptime even more. Now, his burst is actually the reason why I think he's going to be so good. So we activate his burst here. He's going to have 3 of these icicles going around him. Each one, whenever it hits an enemy, is going to do cryo damage. And, you know, it's not going to be the most cryo damage in the world, but it is going to apply cryo very consistently, especially since if your main carry is a physical unit, you're gonna want enemies close up, so those icicles are going to be triggering cryo on many units. Now, if you are using someone for example, my main carry is Razor, and Razor really wants cryo with him so that he can trigger a lot of superconduct procs, lowering my enemy's physical resistance. And I think Kaeya is the best at that, because if we take a look at the other cryo heroes we have access to currently, Chi-Chi, while she's admittedly very difficult to get, her being a 5-star unit, you know, her cryo application is not the best. Her skill has a very long cooldown, and, you know, her burst, if you build her for energy recharge, she can get it off quite often. But in terms of keeping cryo on the field, you know, she's not the greatest. She's good at bursts, but not consistency. Now, Chongyun does fight Kaeya for uptime because he is probably the most consistent with his skill. He just turns every auto attack into cryo damage. The problem with Chongyun is that he's not great with heroes or carries who use physical damage. So if your carries are, for example, like a Razor or, you know, a Beidou or a Noelle or a Zhongling, someone you're building with physical damage in mind, Chongyun is going to negate all the physical damage that you build into them. Because he's turning all their normal attacks into cryo damage, it's no longer a physical attack, which will then remove all those bonuses that you built into your character. So while he's very good, if you're building him for a carry that is elemental, for example, a Diluc or a Bennett, he's not going to be the greatest when it comes to physical carries. Now, Diona is a special case. I will be honest, I haven't put as much testing into Diona, so I don't feel comfortable saying how she fits in between these two, Kaeya and Chongyun. She is currently the next one I'm looking to test and replacing my Chi-Chi, because it does feel like her kit will be a little bit better tailored to applying cryo damage instead of Chi-Chi, but I feel like Diona's heals just might not be there to replace my Chi-Chi yet. So we will test that. I do think Diona is a very good replacement for Chi-Chi. However, if you don't have that Chi-Chi, since Diona is way easier to get. Now, on top of all that, one of the things that I think makes Kaeya really shine as a burst support is the stat that gets increased when you ascend him, which is energy recharge. Now, he doesn't scale any of his damage, you know, like a Mona would on his energy recharge, but we do want to get that burst up as often as possible. So the more energy recharge we have, the faster that will build, and you know, the more consistent we'll be able to keep his burst up, dealing a bunch of damage, dealing a bunch of cryo damage, and keeping up all our reactions very consistently. Now, the one downside about Kaeya and his burst is the duration. His duration is not the best. So if we take a look here at the skill attributes of his burst, we're looking at a cooldown of 15 seconds, which is pretty reasonable. But we're also looking at a duration of 8 seconds, and 8 seconds is a really short time. Now, if we take a look at some of the other best supports in the game, so first off, we have Bennett here. Now, if we take a look at his burst, his duration here is 12 seconds, and his cooldown is 15 seconds. Now, that's a very small percentage that you can't actually keep his burst up. Next up, if we look at Jing Cho, same thing, duration of 15 seconds with a cooldown of 20 seconds. But if you were able to get his Constellation 2, it's going to extend the duration of his burst by 3 seconds, bringing him up to a duration of 18 seconds with a cooldown of 20, leaving only 2 seconds where you're not actually keeping his burst up, which is very beneficial in terms of outputting damage as well as keeping a Hydra element up on the field at all times. Finally, if we look at Fischl here, you know, same thing. Now, in terms of Oz's duration on her skill, we're looking at 10 seconds with a cooldown of 25 seconds. The difference here, though, is that her burst does the same thing. It brings Oz to the field. So overall, we have a duration here of 20 seconds with a cooldown of 25, plus a cooldown of 15 seconds on her burst. So she's also very consistent at keeping up her burst. So why then does Kaeya get a pass? Well, if we take a look at his constellations, Constellation 2 says every time Glacial Waltz defeats an enemy during its duration is increased by 2.5 seconds up to a maximum of 15 seconds. Now, that may not sound super exciting because it makes it sound like Glacial Waltz, his burst, has to get the kill in order for this to proc. However, that is not the case. There is actually a mistranslation, and what this actually means is that every time somebody, it doesn't matter who, the active character, it doesn't matter, gets a kill with Glacial Waltz active, you will get an increase in 2.5 seconds with a duration up to 15 seconds. That means that if you are consistently getting kills, your burst can have potentially a 100% uptime. Now, if we take a look at this video here from Reddit, we can see Kaeya is going to use his burst. We're then going to switch over to Child, and what you're going to notice is that there are no teal or light blue damage numbers. It's all white damage, which means that Child got all his kills from his basic attack. Now, if you look, the duration is actually going to end right after Kaeya's burst is active again, which means that the burst itself does not need to get the kill, only be active when a kill happens. So basically what this means is that if our carry is a very capable carry and able of killing enemies very quickly, we can essentially keep up his burst 100% of the time. Now, you may be saying, well, Kaeya's never been on a banner, so how likely is it that I'm going to be able to get him up to Constellation 2? Because let's be honest, if you're a free-to-play player out there, it's going to be quite difficult to get him up that high, and if you're a whale, even then it might be difficult to get him up that high. But the thing is, everyone at this point in time has the ability, has the access to get a C1 Kaeya. So of course, Kaeya is a free-to-play unit, so automatically you're going to have him at Constellation 0. And Kaeya is currently in the Star Glitter shop, so if you do have a bunch of Star Glitter hanging around, you could go ahead and get him up to C1 if you haven't actually gotten any extra constellations from wishing. And while that won't necessarily get you up to Constellation 2, it significantly lowers the requirements in order to get the second constellation, in order to make him honestly quite a better support unit than he would be without this constellation. But of course, when he does come around on a banner and it is easier to get his constellation up, Constellation 6 is really going to help him out as a supporting character. Increasing the amount of icicles he generates from 3 to 4, it means there's going to be a lot less extra, dead space there. It's basically going to increase the potency of his burst by 33%. Also, generating 15 energy whenever it's cast means that it's going to be much easier to keep his burst active at all times. Now, his burst damage is, it's not going to be the greatest right off the bat. His scaling, it's fine. It's going to do a decent amount of damage, especially if you're surrounded by enemies. But if we're looking at kind of the top tier supports in terms of like Xingqiu and Bennett, his overall damage as a supporting role is not going to be the highest yet. There is some potential coming in the future, and that's what we'll be talking about next, is the potential Cryo Set artifacts. Now, what I want to make known here before we actually talk about this is I do not recommend building any heroes based on leaks. Remember, these are leaks. I have not seen anything official yet that these are 100% confirmed, just that they are leaks. Things that are leaks are always subject to change. They might not even be accurate. They could be photoshops or something like that. So if you are, if you haven't built up your Kaeya yet and something like this is exciting you, I highly recommend you wait. Stuff like your Mora and your Hero's Wits, you can't bring those back if you go and level up a character. So if you are thinking that you maybe want to level up Kaeya because of this set, I would highly recommend you wait. Now, if you're looking to build Kaeya regardless, that's another point entirely, but I do highly recommend that you hold out if this is the reason you're looking to build Kaeya. But I do think that it's okay to look at these in theorycraft because they can give us some insight into what the potential meta could be like in a couple weeks to a couple months, but it might not come to fruition. These things can always change. So keep that in mind before you do any kind of investment in your characters. Now, looking at this set is very important for Kaeya. First of all, that 2-piece bonus, getting a 15% cryo damage bonus is going to be very important. It's hard enough getting cryo damage bonus on your cut piece, so just getting that 2-piece bonus is something that he's missing right now. Now, the 4-piece bonus is where he gets really, really exciting. So when a character attacks an enemy affected by cryo, their crit rate is increased by 20%. Now, that is huge. If we can consistently keep cryo on the field, that's a huge boost to your crit rate. And then the second part is if the enemy is frozen, crit rate is increased by an additional 20%. So if we're attacking frozen enemies, we're looking at a 40% crit rate. That is nutty. That's why, like, part of me thinks that this is going to be changed because it just seems so ridiculously high, but who knows? Like, the cryo resonance itself has some built-in crit, so they may want cryo to be, the element of crit rate. So what this all means is that if we have this artifact set at a 4-piece set, we're looking at a 5% crit rate that he's going to have right off the bat. That's a base stat. We have a potential 20 to 40% crit rate from his artifacts. We have a 15% crit rate to cryo affected enemies if you have cryo resonance, which you should have whatever resonance your main carry is. Plus, if you have him at C1, which everyone has the ability to have at this time, you'll get an additional 15% crit rate on your normal attacks against any enemies affected by cryo, which means that overall, before we account for his weapon, before we account for artifacts, we can get his crit rate to about 55 to 75%. Now, granted, that is based on cryo effectiveness and frozen effectiveness, but that's a huge number for not even considering his weapon or artifacts yet, which means we have a lot of flexibility potentially in how we could build him. Now, this is one of the reasons that I think we could potentially be looking at Kaeya becoming, the cryo carry if you wanted one, especially if you're free to play. I think he could be a really potent carry. But this is one of the reasons, because we can get his crit rate so high, because it's not like, his basic attack is going to hit really hard like a claymore user. It's not like his skill and burst are scaling incredibly high, but because of all these bonuses we can get for him being a cryo character specifically, we can get some really big numbers without a whole lot of investment because it's coming just on passive elements. Another reason I think that he could also lend himself to being a carry for a lot of players is the fact that his basic attack scales the highest compared to any sword user in the game. That is including your 5-star units. Now, that does not mean that he's going to be dealing the most damage off his basic attack. So if we take a look at this, his actual percentage on his basic attack talent that is the highest scaling among any sword users in the game. But the other thing we have to take into consideration is his basic attack. And if we look at his base attack at level 90, he'll be getting 223. Now, I did actually look at all the base stats of all our sword units that are currently in the game. And if we look at that, the only units that have higher base attack than Kaeya are, in this order, Keqing, Jean, and Chi-Chi, all of which are 5-star units. All the others, Bennett, your main character, the Traveler, Xingqiu, they all have lower base attacks. So if you are a free-to-play player, in terms of investment, how much you can take the same amount of investment from one hero to another, Kaeya on his basic attacks is actually going to be doing the most damage. So if you're looking for a carry, you know, and you want a sword user carry, say like you got lucky and got a 5-star sword, he's going to be dealing the most damage with his basic attacks, which may lend him, you know, to being one of your carries. Now, if the artifact sets for the cryo bonus is accurate, that may just lend to the fact that, you know, he would become a main carry. Now, if that set is not accurate and it's not actually that, I don't think you would want to use him as a main carry. I think that the benefit of that set way outweighs his kit right now. So again, if you're looking to build him as a carry, I would hang on to see if that set is accurate. But as a supporting unit, you know, his kit still stands strong. So in terms of what a Kaeya DPS carry team could look like, this is kind of where I'm thinking I would like to start. A lot of these characters are, you know, fairly easy or have been fairly easy to obtain, even if you are free to play. The exception to that is Bennett. He was only actually available in the Star Glitter shop. He hasn't been on a banner yet. Hopefully he will be very soon. But in terms of this setup, Chongyun is a perfect support to Kaeya. His skill is actually incredibly important because if you're in that circle, he's going to be turning all your damage into cryo damage. That means that we don't actually have to worry about investing it all into Kaeya's basic attack, which normally you would want to do a little bit with some kind of carry who is going to be doing just physical. And that's one of Kaeya's weaknesses as a carry currently, is that his basic attack is doing split damage. So his basic attack is doing physical damage while his skill and burst are doing elemental damage. Someone like Diluc can infuse his basic attacks with pyro damage, so you don't necessarily need to worry about investing in pyro damage. His basic attacks are going to be doing that, so you'll benefit from the elemental damage. Kaeya, on the other hand, doesn't have that luxury. So with Chongyun's skill, we can turn all his basic attacks into cryo attacks, which means that if we do invest into cryo damage, say on your cup, you'll be able to benefit from that cryo damage bonus, which is very nice. Plus, if we have that 4-piece set, which hopefully is accurate, we'll also be getting a benefit there. Next up is Xingqiu, and look, Xingqiu is really climbing the ladders as of recently in terms of his supporting capabilities. His burst does insane amounts of damage, plus we want to be getting enemies frozen for that added benefit from the artifact set. So because of that and his very consistent uptime, and with, you know, Chongyun turning everything into cryo attacks, we're going to be freezing enemies very consistently. And the good thing about this, right now, Chongyun and Xingqiu are a very potent combo in terms of freeze. The problem is that Chongyun tends to shatter frozen enemies, right? Any Claymore user is going to shatter ice. Kaeya has the benefit of being a sword user, so he's not actually going to be shattering enemies, so we can get a ton of CC down on the field and get our crit rate really high and not break the freeze, which is very important and very nice. These three would be insane together. Lastly, we have Bennett as our healer. We do need a healer, and I was trying to figure out who would be the best one, and I think Bennett would be the best. Now, he is going to be melting our frozen enemies, which is not the worst. We can get a lot of damage out of Bennett from melt procs, but because his heal uptime, his burst uptime is so high, we can keep that down on the field a lot, bringing a ton of attack bonus over to Kaeya. Bennett, if you level up his burst, can easily throw down like anywhere from 300 to 700, depending on how high you level him up, depending on how high ascended a weapon you give him. He can throw a ton of attack to whoever's being healed. Now, he does have the downside of only being able to heal up to 70%, but Kaeya does have a little bit of self-sustainability in his kit from his skill being able to heal him by 15% of his attack. Plus, if you were to get him up to Constellation 4, he does have a little bit of tankiness built in there as well, so he does have a little bit of self-sustainability. And currently the best sword barring a 5-star sword that you can give a carry is the black sword from the battle pass. So if you have one of those, that also has some built-in sustainability. So we don't really have to worry about that 70% as much. Plus we have Xingqiu. His rain swords are going to be providing some damage reduction as well as some side effect healing there as well. So overall, this is where I'd be looking to start for a Kaeya DPS team. If, you know, all the rumors about the Cryo Set are accurate, this is where I'd be looking at for a DPS. Now, all that being said, he still is a very strong supporting character. I would not sleep on him there. The other really cool thing about this team is if you're saving up your wishes for Kamisato Ayaka, coming in, let's face it, quite a while. I don't think she's going to be coming within, you know, the next patch or two. Probably from what I've seen, it's like 1.4 she'll be coming. But she is another Cryo Sword user, and as a 5-star, I have a feeling she's going to be quite a bit better than Kaeya. So if you were to go about investing in this team, again, once we have confirmation whether or not that artifact set is accurate, you can then switch your Kaeya for your Kamisato Ayaka and still have a really solid team, keeping 3/4 of your units. I think that's very important when trying to future-proof your account, especially if you're limited in terms of resources that you can have access to. It's important to choose very flexible units. And at this point, I think Bennett and Xingqiu, they are going to be, it's going to take a while for them to be outclassed. They are just very solid units. So this is kind of where I'd be looking to start if you wanted to build Kaeya as a DPS carry. But again, like I said, this is very important. Do not build characters if you're limited on resources due to leaks. Leaks are subject to change, but it's a fun little theory crafting experiment that we can play with. So guys, that's my little ramble on Kaeya and why I think that he's been slept on. I do think that he should be higher rated than people are currently looking at him to. I think that if that artifact set is accurate, people will be putting up higher on their support list. I think he's a really good support, and I think that coming up in the next couple months, he could be a really good, really solid carry. I'll say that. I don't know if he'll scale as well as like a Diluc or a Klee or a Keqing. That being said, if you're limited on who you can use as your DPS carries, he could be a good one for you free-to-play players coming up real soon. But guys, that's all I got for today. Hopefully you did enjoy. If you did and you want to see some more content from me, you can head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazzy, or you can subscribe right here on YouTube. Click that red subscribe button, like the video, and click that notification bell. That way you never miss a video. And if you want to join the community of our Discord, link will be down in the description. Go ahead over there, join us. We have a good time. But guys, that's all I got for today. Hopefully you did enjoy, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.